Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the final lecture video of the year, well, of the 2018 year anyway. I'm Mr. Shaw, as you know. Let's get to it. We're going to talk about the New Deal. We've been talking in class about the Great Depression, about what American citizens had to deal with while they were going through that, and how little the government was doing to fix it. So now we have a new election. 1932, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, he wins the election. He's a Democrat, and he wants to take over. He wants to change things, and the New Deal is how he does it. So let's go ahead and get into it. So like I said, 1932 presidential election, Americans were ready for a change. Herbert Hoover, it's a really rough life to be if you're Herbert Hoover, to be honest with you, because he just didn't believe that it was the government's job to help people in these sort of situations. So he was just kind of sticking to his principles, and unfortunately, people didn't like him for it. It's really hard to stick to your principles when people are starving and dying. So, but again, it's not my job to judge. Anyway, so the Democrats, they are not going to nominate New York Governor Franklin Delano Roosevelt, henceforth known as FDR. He is reform-minded. He projects friendliness, confidence. He does actually a lot in New York to try to help the Depression. The Democrats are overwhelmingly going to win the presidency, the Senate, and the House, which is good for them and good for American citizens, to be honest, because they are going to be instituting all sorts of things to try to fix the Depression, which the Republicans were not doing. So part of the problem about one of the reasons why the Constitution was amended with the 20th Amendment was because during the Great Depression, people were waiting for Roosevelt to take over. He was elected in November, and he didn't take office until March. And so there was 4 months where we were stuck with Herbert Hoover. We were stuck with Republicans who were not doing anything to help the Depression, as people, as I mentioned, were starving and dying. And so that's why they passed the 20th Amendment. You don't need to know that necessarily. You'll learn more about that in government, but that's what they call it, a lame duck session. And the 20th Amendment was passed specifically to combat that, to fix that, so we'd have less time in between the election and the actual inauguration of the president. So once he takes over, he's going to start with he's going to kind of create his own little what's called a brain trust, and he uses his cabinet, but he's also trying to surround himself with as many intelligent people as he can to try to fix this issue, to try to again, America's never dealt with anything like this, and he is the first president to really try to fix it. This is the complete opposite of laissez-faire capitalism. This is the government getting directly involved in the economy to try to fix something that is hurting its citizens. So he creates this idea called the New Deal, and the New Deal is relief for the needy, economic recovery recovery for the economy, and then reform or financial reform to try to make sure that this doesn't happen again. If you need to remember that, again, think of the 3 R's: relief, recovery, and reform. We'll talk more about that in class, but again, that's just kind of a helpful way to remember the goals of the New Deal. So in the first 100 days, FDR does an insane amount of work. He is going to pass he's going to actually sign 15 major New Deal laws that are designed to get the people working, to try to fix the economy again. Because again, that's a major problem, is that the people aren't working, they're not making money, and they're upset about it. So he tries to fix that first, but we need to make sure that the banks are okay, because the bank runs that happened, and the banks are very unstable, so people's money wasn't safe. So the first thing he did was he passed the Emergency Banking Relief Act, which permits the Treasury Department to inspect the banks. They decided which ones are insolvent, sound, or need loans. Again, insolvent are they're just unsavable, they're unsalvageable. And because of this act, because the Treasury Department is making sure that all the banks are okay, and they're not going to reopen banks that aren't able to actually take people's money, the public's confidence in the banks are revived. One more thing on the 100 days is FDR did so much in his first 100 days as president that every single president since FDR has been compared to him with what he has done in his first 100 days in office. And no one has come close to the type of legislation, the sweeping legislation that we've seen, or that we saw from FDR. The other thing that that FDR does really well is that he communicates with the people. We have had recent inventions of of the radio, and the television isn't quite there yet. That's going to come in the 50s, but the radio is a really important tool to be able to communicate with citizens. Everybody's they're affordable. A lot of people are going to have them in their homes. Again, people are going to listen to the radio at night as a family. So what he does is he starts giving these things called fireside chats. And they're literally just FDR kind of giving a really informal speech to the citizens of the United States, kind of explaining why he's doing what he's doing. And if you think about it, that makes a lot of sense, because a lot of the government officials, they had Herbert Hoover explained what he was doing and why he was doing it, he might have gotten some more sympathy. Probably not, but what he didn't explain. Hey guys, I don't believe in the government involvement in the economy. Laissez-faire, guys. You guys were all about it 30 years ago. What's happened? The problem is that since he's not explaining that, it's very difficult for the people to have any understanding of what's happening. So FDR is trying to fix that by clearly explaining everything he's doing and why he's doing it, to get the people on his side. And FDR was probably the most popular president, or one of the most popular, especially during his first couple of years. I mean, he won 4 terms, or 4 terms as president. He's the only one to do that. But again, in the other people's defense, since him, they passed the 22nd Amendment, so they can't do that anymore. Anyway, I get ahead of myself. So the first chat helps calm fears about the banks. Americans are going to return their savings to the banks. Remember that it's a process. Like it's a give and take sort of scenario. If Americans are investing in banks, then the banks can then give out loans to the people or to other people to help their improvement. They can buy more stuff, which helps businesses, and then the businesses can hire more people. Again, it's just this whole circle. Sorry about that. People don't know I'm recording a video. I should be more forthcoming with what I'm doing. Anyway, moving on. Again, so it's a circle of people helping people. Again, you have to spend money to make money. There's all kinds of stuff going on. And if the people are too afraid to put their money in banks, then there's a lot of other parts of the economy that are not going to be able to benefit from that. All right, so the first thing, like I mentioned, the banks, we got to fix those first. The Glass-Steagall Act establishes Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. This is absolutely important to know, not the act itself, but you need to know about the FDIC. So what the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation does is that it insures individual bank accounts and regulates banking practices. So next time you go into a bank with your parents, or if you have a bank account yourself and you go into the bank, there's a little sticker on the door that says FDIC. And the reason they have that there is because beforehand, like we said, in this Great Depression, when all these bank runs happened, their money wasn't insured. So when this bank closed down, all your money was just gone. And that's a huge problem. So the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation now will insure your savings, your bank accounts, up to a certain amount. I think that back then it was something like maybe $5,000. I don't quote me on that, but now it's much higher. It's something upwards of $100,000. The Federal Securities Act, companies must give all information on stocks. So the first thing you need to know is FDIC. Second thing you need to know really well is the Securities and Exchange Commission, and that is created to regulate the stock market. I don't know why I said that so weird. Stock market, that's better. And then FDR also gets a law allowing production of some alcoholic beverages. And then by 1933, so the next year after that year that he takes office, the 21st Amendment is added to the Constitution, and the 18th Amendment that prohibited alcohol is now repealed. And that's interesting, just because yes, people are bummed out, like they all lost their jobs, they have no money, but alcohol is kind of a distraction for that. So it's an interesting choice to go ahead and repeal the prohibition of alcohol. But I think one that they probably made intentionally, because they wanted to at least give the people something that says, hey, I know things are going badly right now, but again, at least here you enjoy this, so take it and don't worry about being poor anymore. I don't know. Anyway, there's a lot of stuff here, but again, make sure you know Securities and Exchange Commission and the FDIC are the most important things. Fireside chat, probably a close third. All right, so the main deal of the New Deal is to help the American people. The Roosevelt administration is going to work on ways to stimulate the economy and offer aid to the people. So first up, we've got some major problems for the farming industry. So the Agricultural Adjustment Act, the AAA, is going to raise food prices and lower the supply, which specifically is going to help farmers. Again, raising prices sounds like a bad idea, but if you think about for farmers, they are the ones, like since the prices were so low, they weren't making any money off of their crops. So we need the prices to be at least a little bit higher so that the farmers are going to get some relief from that, and then they're going to actually start to make a little bit of profit off of their hard work. The Tennessee Valley Authority is going to create jobs renovating and building dams. The Tennessee Valley Authority still provides electricity to the Tennessee Valley area, and that was created in the New Deal. That still works to this day. The Cumberland Homesteads offers farms and jobs to poor families. The project ultimately fails. You don't need to worry about that. That's not on the test. So that's rural. The other thing we need to do is we need to provide jobs to people. There's so many people out of work. The unemployment rate is sky high. And the main way we can do that is by helping, just having them do things around our communities that need to be done, or maybe not necessarily need to be done, but can be done, which the government is going to pay for. So the Civilian Conservation Corps is the first example. They're going to provide public works jobs for young men. So public works could be anything from, helping to build roads, helping to build parks, constructing highways, constructing houses, anything at all that is going to really help these young men feel a sense of independence again. They don't want handouts, guys. Americans at this time, they want jobs. They want to work. They don't want to receive money from the government. They want to feel like they are able to provide for their families. The next thing is the Public Works Administration, it gives money to states to create jobs, and the states can kind of do that in any way they see fit. And then the Civil Works Administration helps to build rural schools and roads, also pays teachers. So again, you're getting like rural areas that might not have schooling. Like there's a lot of people that are out of work, but we can at least get the kids into school, so they're doing something, so the parents then can maybe focus on trying to find jobs. They don't have to worry about babysitting, anything like that. So there's a lot of different ways that they went about trying to get America back to work. So I don't want you guys to write any of this down. So you can just listen for this one. So the first thing the other thing we need to do is we need to promote fair practices. So the NIRA, it stands for National Industrial Recovery Act. What it's going to do, it's going to establish codes of fair practice for industries. And they're going to create the National Recovery Administration, the NRA, not the National Rifle Association. The NRA is going to set standards, prices, and limits production in the industry. So remember that part of the problem of the 20s to 30s is that the economy in the 20s was going really, really well, and then once we get to the 30s, the Great Depression happens, the stock market crashes, and we have all this surplus of goods that nobody has the money to buy anymore. So by limiting production, we are going to kind of halt that and make sure, again, the more supply you have, the lower the prices are, and the lower the prices are, the less profit you make. So when we limit the supply and kind of set standards for prices, it's going to help these businesses to once again start making a profit, which will allow them to hire more people. Congress is also going to guarantee workers' rights to unions and collective bargaining in the National Industrial Recovery Act, it's in industry or industrial? I think industrial. Anyway, this is a huge gain for unions because these people are worried. They don't want to lose their jobs. They want to make sure that if they do have jobs, they're probably clinging onto them with a death grip. So this is a really big improvement for workers' rights and for unions. Lastly, we've got some giving some food, some clothing, and some shelter to the people who have maybe lost everything in the Great Depression. The Homeowners Loan Corporation is going to give loans to prevent foreclosures. The Federal Housing Administration is going to give loans for mortgages and repairs to homes, and then the Federal Emergency Relief Administration is going to give direct relief to the needy people that, like I said, just might have lost everything in the crash or in the Depression itself. So the New Deal is a drastic change for American government, and it's not we hadn't really seen it before, but it fundamentally changed how our government interacts with the people. So what we're starting to do now or what the government is starting to do now is called deficit spending, and they are spending more money than the government takes in. And that's going to basically fund the New Deal. So the government's basically going into debt to try to pull the economy out of the Great Depression. Now, that's not going to be an overly popular idea with conservatives. They're going to worry that the New Deal is going to be used to control businesses. They're going to trying to socialize the economy. Again, all these ideas like the government providing jobs for citizens, like that's a socialist idea. Liberals, they're actually going to be saying that the government's not doing enough. The government needs to do more to help the poor, to fix the economy. So FDR is kind of in a weird spot. Okay, he's trying to do his best, but liberals don't think it's enough. Conservatives think it's way too much. So the Supreme Court's going to start. The Supreme Court at this time is extremely conservative. It was the most conservative court that we had seen in a number of decades. And so they're going to start striking down a lot of these New Deal policies like the National Industrial Recovery Act and the Agricultural Adjustment Administration. They're going to strike those down as unconstitutional. And it's really going to make FDR upset. And these are just he calls the people on the Supreme Court the 9 old men that don't really see what he's trying to do. So he proposes an idea to Congress to actually that would allow him to pack the court. And what it said was that every justice that turns 70 and doesn't retire, that would allow the president to appoint a new justice. So essentially what it would do is that it would allow him to insert a bunch of liberal judges or justices onto the Supreme Court. And that they probably wouldn't find his policies unconstitutional anymore. It makes him look really bad. Like it's kind of like, man, like this guy's kind of like becoming like a little bit like a dictator, or a little bit like a king in some cases. He's not really following the laws as set forth in the Constitution. It does make him look bad, but like I said, FDR is very popular with the people, and ironically, there in the next, I think, by the time he dies in 1945, FDR had appointed 7 new justices. So he pretty much replaced the entire Supreme Court by the time in his like almost 13 years as president. So it made him look a little bit bad, but he kind of got going again, and it was okay. Which again, so the New Deal policies are not going to be struck down anymore once he starts putting liberal justices onto the court. All right, so that's the first New Deal. Now we get into the second New Deal, which is going to be his re-election in 1936. We'll talk a little bit about what that means, but mostly we're going to focus on the last section, which is the impact of the New Deal. All right, so the second 100 days, it is really marked by FDR trying to do more of the same. He wins a sweeping election in 1936, but by 1935, the recovery of the economy was really not what FDR had wanted. It hadn't, and it recovered nearly to the point that he had said it would, and he was trying really hard to change everything, to fix things for Americans, but it wasn't working. So FDR launches his second phase of the New Deal. There's more relief for farmers, more relief for workers. He's trying to get it done. He's like, okay, guys, we're going to figure it out one way or the other. And first, for his first lady, his wife, Eleanor Roosevelt, she was actually a social reformer. She is prodding the president to kind of protect more people. She traveled all over the country during FDR's presidency to observe social conditions. She was talking about rights. She wanted more rights for African Americans, more rights for all minorities, really. More protections for women. And she kind of helped him realize the kinds of laws that needed to be passed, or the things that he should be doing to fix social injustices. Unfortunately, the Depression and the problems of the economy during the time really didn't allow him to do very much to fix social injustices, because he was really focused on trying to help all Americans, not necessarily just certain groups. So, like I said, 1936, Democrats win the presidency, large majorities in both houses. Again, people know that the Republicans don't want to help the economy. They don't want to do the sort of things that FDR is doing. So that's why they're going to keep. It's better to try to have the Democrats in there that are trying to help, rather than the Republicans that are going to want to say, hey, you need to rely on charitable donations to get yourself out of this slump. So this is the first time that most African Americans vote Democratic, and that's going to continue to this day, to the present time. African Americans are almost always going to vote Democratic. It's also the first time labor unions give united support to a presidential candidate, and as you can see, he wins by a landslide. The other guy, Landon, I literally, like, gun to my head, couldn't have told you his name. He only won 2 states. And so it looks like he might at least won 2 states, and maybe there was a few other here, some of the smaller ones that he might have been able to hold, but it looks like just those 2. So anyway, FDR is very popular, and he's really riding this out to try to make sure that he can still be actually fixing the economy. All right, so this next part, don't write this. What we know about the reason why we know farmers needed more help is because the Dust Bowl was still going on. We talked about that in class in the Great Depression simulation. 2 out of every 5 farms were mortgaged. Many farmers were in default, in danger of their farms being foreclosed upon by the banks. And then farm machines were replacing workers on large farms, and that's part of the reason why these farmers went into debt anyways, because these machines were really awesome, because they allowed them to do more work in a more efficient way. But there's less jobs for those former farm workers, and those farm machines are really expensive. So it's kind of a double-edged sword a little bit, because now you take a loan out for this big farm machine, but then when prices drop, you won't be able to pay the bank back, and if your farm's mortgaged, you won't be able to pay the bank back for your mortgage, and so you might lose the whole farm. Anyway, we've already talked a little bit more about that, but he did a lot more to help those farmers. In 1936, he passed the Soil Conservation and Domestic Allotment Act, which is going to replace the Agricultural Adjustment Act, and it rewards farmers for practicing soil conservation. And because, again, that didn't happen. The soil was just being overused, and that's part of the reason that the Dust Bowl happened in the first place. He also passed a new Agricultural Adjustment Act that avoids the unconstitutional provision, which is why the Supreme Court overturned it. And the Resettlement Administration gives loans to small farmers to buy land. And the Farm Security Administration gives loans to tenant farmers to buy land. And then also the Farm Security Administration hires photographers to shoot rural towns, farms, and farmers. Again, you're giving it's a job, and you can use the government that can then use that data to realize what areas of the country really need help, or to see if the kinds of practices they're instituting are working. More relief for workers. During his second New Deal, he starts the Works Progress Administration, which creates more jobs. The WPA is going to, their workers are going to build airports, roads, public buildings. Again, kind of an extension of the Civilian Conservation Corps. But again, Civilian Conservation Corps is going to focus more on, like I said, that conservation part. It's going to be more about parks, stuff like that. Women workers are going to sew clothes for the needy. the WPA is going to they're going to employ professional writers, artists, performers. A lot of like beautification is going on now. Like they're going to like try to like yes, the people are depressed, they are poor, but what we can do is we can give them jobs that are paid for by the government that is, like working on making our surroundings look better. Like that, and like that's why I keep mentioning the parks, but like they can work in the cities and they can have these artists create beautiful murals like on the sides of buildings and stuff like that, and that would just kind of allow, yes, it solves two problems. It makes our surroundings look better, so hopefully that it'll kind of help the people get into better moods, but it also gives people like artists jobs that they desperately need. Also, the National Youth Administration is going to give education, jobs, and counseling to people that need it. It's also going to give aid to students in exchange for part-time work. So just all kinds of stuff that Roosevelt is doing to help workers and really just try to get America back on their feet. We also are going to work on some labor and a few other reforms here. Roosevelt and Congress are going to work to address labor relations and economic security for retirees. So the main thing are two really big things in this part. The first thing is the National Labor Relations Act, also known as the Wagner Act, which is going to replace the National Industrial Recovery Administration. They are going to protect the right to join, like protect workers' rights to join unions, also to collectively bargain together. It also prohibits unfair labor practices. Wagner Act is also going to set up the National Labor Relations Board, which still exists to this day, and they are going to hear testimony about labor practices and hold elections to determine if workers want unions or not, and if there are unfair practices happening, they will put an end to that. The Fair Labor Standards Act is also going to set maximum hours and minimum wage, which is really good for a lot of workers to kind of still like start getting a more livable wage once you do get a job. All right, the second major thing you need to know is the Social Security Act. Guys, the elderly were in a particularly bad spot in the Great Depression because they weren't able to work. And it's the same thing with people who are injured. They can't, like, if they lose all of their savings, they have nothing, and they don't have the ability to go back to work for themselves. So the Social Security Act is going to create the Social Security system, which is going to provide insurance for retirees that are 65 or older. It's going to provide unemployment compensation, and then aid to the disabled, and then families with children. And the Social Security Act is still around to this day. As you work, you are going to pay into it, and then once you turn 65, you will start receiving money from the government, essentially as a kind of it's supposed to allow you to not live in poverty, and that's because you are no longer of age to work, or if you're injured, same deal. You don't have to be 65 if you're injured. If you can't work, you will receive money from the Social Security Administration. Also, they're going to expand and regulate utilities. The Rural Electrification Administration is going to bring electricity to farms and rural homes. So now we see the expansion of that. Again, a lot of people that are living on farms wouldn't necessarily still have access to electricity that's been around now for over 30 years. And the Public Utility Holding Company Act is going to aim to stop financial corruption. And that's like the corruption that you're going to see in these utility companies, overcharging for things, stuff like that. So again, the exact opposite of laissez-faire capitalism. The government is absolutely getting involved to make sure that there is fairness and the people are protected throughout the country. All right. Last thing, I really want to talk about the impact of the New Deal, not only on the 1930s, but also on the decades to follow. So the New Deal practically ended by 1939. It did help reduce suffering, but it absolutely did not end the Great Depression. Roosevelt was in favor of deficit spending, but there was a certain time where he's like, guys, enough is enough. Like, we can't go any further into debt. And you can kind of see as he increases, he pretty much doubles the national debt from when he takes office in 1932 or 1933 rather, all the way here, and it stays the same throughout his presidency. And then right here is when we enter World War II, and then it skyrockets then as well. But so he doesn't want to spend, not in favor of spending more money. And so we start cutting some programs that are putting the government really deeply in debt. Ironically, the Social Security Act, which is the most the government has to spend money on now, was not cut. And Congress is going to cut back on some of these programs as well. And then again in 1939, World War II breaks out, and the United States kind of begins to prepare. We're helping out our allies by sending them, war supplies. There starts to be massive spending on guns, tanks, ships, and airplanes, and that is actually what brings the United States out of the Great Depression, not any of the New Deal policies that FDR had instituted. But a lot of his policies remain. And like I said, by 1939, the New Deal was effectively over, but it did create a lot of lasting reforms. The first and most important ones were in banking and finance with the Security and Exchange Commission that regulates investment and the stock market. And you have to be truthful. You can't speculate anymore about what these prices of a stock might be so you can drive it up. You can't do that. The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, as I mentioned, it regulates banking and protects depositors. We also have now protected workers' rights. We are setting standards. We're banning child labor, permitting unions and collective bargaining. National Labor Relations Board still mediates labor disputes to this day. And then Social Security it's basically the federal government's going to take responsibility of citizens' welfare for the first time ever. And this is a huge change for America. And a lot of people, there's still a lot of people anyway that disagree with Social Security. They think that it's a kind of an excuse for people to be lazy. Same thing with like welfare. They think that you should help yourself, that the government shouldn't have to provide money to you. You should, get a job when you need to. But it's more difficult for the elderly to do that, which is exactly what Social Security does. It's going to provide for the aged, the disabled, and the needy. Again, you guys don't need to write this last part. The rural scene, we're helping out the farmers. The Commodity Credit Corporation is going to make loans to farmers. Agricultural price supports are going to set a precedent of federal subsidies to farmers. Guys, it's not easy to be a farmer. You don't make a lot of money, but you provide an absolutely necessary service. So right now, again, even to this day, the government is still going to provide subsidies, which is basically money to these farmers to help them to survive. The environment, again, the Civilian Conservation Corps is going to plant trees, build hiking trails. They're going to fire lookout towers. Soil Conservation Service teaches methods to preserve soil. Taylor Grazing Act reduces grazing on public lands. Government-sponsored strip mining, coal burning causes pollution. So we're into some negative things now. So it's not all great. But for the most part, it is going to help kind of get America, I guess, hopefully back on the right track. World War II, as I said, will eventually take us out. Tennessee Valley Authority still works to this day. They create electricity, prevent floods in the Tennessee Valley region. Government's going to add a lot of national parks, wildlife refuges, and then wilderness areas as well. So there's a lot to it, but this fundamentally changes America. And this is the last slide. So the legacy of the New Deal, as I just said, it fundamentally changed how the American government interacts with its people. And the first thing it does is that it expands the power of the federal government drastically. The government's now going to be creating jobs, regulating supply and demand in certain cases, settling labor disputes. It's going to give the president an active role in shaping the economy. No president before this had ever had that opportunity. And the president, even to this day, still has a major role in doing that, or in regulating the economy, rather. And the authority of the government to create agencies for regulation, it's huge, guys. The government is not going to participate in these laissez-faire economics anymore because in order to make sure that this kind of thing doesn't happen again, we want to make sure that the citizens are protected. We want to make sure that these companies have regulations that they need to follow. It's going to increase federal aid to the states drastically. A lot of the critics, they think that the federal and state governments are too big. They're also going to believe the federal government's too powerful. There's too much regulation. Liberal critics, they're going to think the opposite, that not enough was done to eliminate economic inequality. And then some of the supporters, though, they are going to welcome this shift away from laissez-faire policies. They believe that it's a good balance between capitalism and socialism. And then it is going to, even if it didn't really get us out of the Great Depression, it's going to do a lot to help the country to start recovering from the Great Depression. That's it. Have a great day, guys. See you next time.